Oh, man, of course it is. And that means it's Punk Rock Safety episode 14.
14.
1-4.
Unlikelier every single time. And
That's
yet here we are. It's just, yeah, it's sort of like any good punk rock band, just utterly shocked every time they book any sort of gig. Like, okay, I guess we're doing it. So here we are, episode 14. We have, as is our style, given it about 4 minutes of really serious thinking beforehand.
What the fuck can we talk about today?
You know, it sounds as if we're unprepared, and that might be because we are. But I think maybe that's good because it's sort of off the cuff. It's not this weird manufactured scripted thing. And today we're going to talk in a very weird and unscripted way about risk assessments, I think.
Yeah.
Is what we decided.
I think it's good though for our 2 listeners that we, or maybe even 3 now, to know that we don't sit awake all night thinking about how best to bore them. That we make it up on the spot.
It's good.
I mean, we made it up
that
4
we don't
minutes
put
ago.
a lot of effort into being terrible. It just comes naturally.
I don't know. Maybe that makes it slightly more pragmatic. If you take anything pragmatic away from this podcast, which is probably not recommended, but look, do what you want. Ron,
this fucking podcast ever, I think.
Awesome. What you got behind you there, friend?
I've got the MXPX, the magnified plaid. Yeah, I don't know. I've dusted them. Because I haven't even thought about them as a band since high school, and then I saw they're playing that No Effects show, and I was like,
Yeah, they are.
I should pull that out and see what's going on.
Well, that's something Ron says a lot, and that's why his time in the security line at the airport is longer than most folks. It's a good band. It's a good band, though. You just set it up, Ron. You can't leave.
That was unfortunate.
Just leave that out in the universe, which is what TSA told you.
Yeah. You're not bringing that on the plane.
You.
Yeah.
Oh, what about you, Dr. David Proven?
I've gone mainstream again. I've gone back to Blink, and just so I don't offend the drummers that listen to this show, I just made sure I picked a nice photo with it, that my head's not covering, kind of like Travis. So Ben, you can stop, you can rest
at least wear a
that
beanie next time.
we care about drummers.
The drummers? Do we really
Everybody.
care, though? Or do we just want them?
100%. Especially a punk drummer. Fast and loud, and that's like all punk drumming.
Yeah, basically.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I've got sick of it all behind me. Which, after Ron and I were fucking around trying to get a bunch of computers to work last week for a bit of a project, I am sick of it all. Because I can't do technological things, apparently.
I bet it was the Russian guy. He just came in.
Come on.
You know what? The fucking Russian guy. Probably had one of those EMPs out there, like a little mini EMP, just blasted all the electronics.
Let me go pee pee. I fuck your computer.
Were you punk enough to throw the fucking things out the window, or did you?
Not yet.
Do you still have them?
Super yet. Close.
Oh man, Ron witnessed it. It was close. I was trying to behave myself, but yeah. There's a limited lifespan for these things if they don't shape up soon. That's all. If I did a risk assessment, it'd probably be a 5B.
5B.
Oh, shit, that's serious.
5C.
See.
Yeah, serious. Which makes me think, I feel like we did talk about, at one point, a risk matrix, but I don't know why. Which is not
Probably
the only way of risk assessment, incidentally, but it's probably the most matrixy version.
So
It's
are
the
we
one
into this
Keanu
now?
Reeves
We're
does.
doing it?
I don't know. We don't have to do it. Is there anything else going on? Run? I mean, I don't want to skip.
No, I think we're good, man.
Okay.
What's a
Are we
risk
gonna get-
assessment?
Are we gonna get tattoos when we go to the Pumpkin Drublic Fest?
I got a pretty
Like
good
Dave's freaked
pirate
out.
themed
I
tattoo
think-
shop that is in Studio
Pirate hooker themed.
I mean, we'll see how the night goes. I'm not going to make promises, but I'm also
I'll
not going to say no.
I'll make promises. I think you know that bad decision making is incoming on that. By the way, because this will come out before that, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Isn't that October 4th?
it'll be right before that, won't it?
5th, 6th, 4th. Yeah, I think so. 4th, 5th, 6th. In sunny Los Angeles, we're going to the Pumpkin Drublic Festival. Final 3 shows for NoFX and a bunch of other bands like MXPX and Descendants and Pennywise and Co-Defendants and all sorts of crazy shit. So you should come.
Yep.
It's a field trip.
Yep.
Yeah.
Punk Rock Safety
Be
field
there.
trip.
Don't
Should
be
make a
fucking lazy.
t-shirt.
If you have to fly overseas, don't be fucking lazy. Do it.
Just don't be fucking lazy. Dave's doing it.
Drink.
I'm doing it.
Dave's raw dogging it in coach, just like no music, no TV.
Yes.
Oh,
just
there'll be
staring at the back of the seat.
music. There'll be music.
Okay.
Don't get kicked off the plane, Dave.
No.
Over the
Okay.
somewhere over the Pacific.
Yeah.
Zip tied to a seat.
This thing's in Honolulu, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Be okay.
You'll be fine. That's fine. So,
All right, Dave. Look, Dave has stuff to do today, so we should
Yeah,
talk
he's-
about the risk that will happen, the risk of failure if we don't get done on time, which our 2 to 3 listeners will be excited about too.
us being done.
Us being done on time. Yeah. Well, just done. I don't know that they've got a schedule. Really just sort of we've stopped talking. Yeah, risk assessment, boys.
What is it? Like, what do we mean by risk assessment? What is that?
Good question.
I think we could. I mean, it's simplest form is an assessment of risk.
That's helpful.
Dave coming in clutch on this one. It's really so. Hey, look,
seriously.
I think in a practical sense, at least from what I see, people confuse very often hazard, the idea of a hazard and the idea of risk. And I don't know, we can, I guess, debate whether that's important. But, they go, oh, it's icy outside. Okay, cool. I mean, if I'm doing accounting work inside, it being icy outside is probably not the worst thing in the world. So, we're talking a hazard, not the, I don't know, without getting some shitty definition of risk, right? But not the potential of that hazard creating some unwanted outcome, which I think is maybe at least one definition. So we're trying to assess what that potential is.
So a hazard is something that can hurt someone, and a risk is the potential of that thing hurting someone, and then an assessment is identifying that potential.
Yeah, potential and severity, I think, by strict definition.
Like how bad it is.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
a bit of thinking about exposure, right? In the sort of really straight line dictionary definition of it, I think it feels different though when you're out doing work, doesn't it?
Yes.
Risk? Okay.
Well, I
Is
think
it just
so.
me today? I'm just
No,
doing
no,
this
no.
today. Sorry,
Yeah,
everybody.
teach us.
I'm gonna mute these 2 fuckers and we'll just we're off to the races.
That's about fucking time.
When we think about risk, though, I always think about it like is the chance of something happening in the future, right?
Yep.
So what we're trying to do is actually predict the probability of certain outcome, occurring in the future. And
So there's some
like,
uncertainty to it, right? I think is
well, it has to be like, I mean, no, unless you
Yeah.
got a crystal ball, Ben, in your office there.
Yeah.
It's
Don't
it's
have a
not
working
right.
computer, but I
Right.
absolutely
I mean,
crystal ball.
I don't know what the fuck's going to happen when old mate climbs onto a roof with no harness. Like, he could be fine. He could, end up in the hospital. Like,
Yeah.
it's none of it's certain. I think we're just trying to understand the chances of different types of outcomes occurring.
I think that's the feeling. So maybe when people describe risk at work in practice, it's that sort of gut feeling of, man, I don't know what the fuck's going to happen. That sense of uncertainty often accompanies risk. So then if we're doing an assessment, we're sort of trying to pinpoint how uncertain we are about this future thing. I don't know, which is tricky, right? That's when Ron gets the tarot cards out.
And I think the thing is though, it's that we don't talk a lot about uncertainty when we're talking about risk in operational risk. So if you're in, if you happen to go to a conference, Vegas adjacent and make your way into one of the casinos, then you kind of the level of certainty and uncertainty is almost calculable. Like you're playing roulette and you can go, okay, I've got this chance. I don't know which will come up, but you can calculate that. But I think what we do in operational risk, you mentioned matrices earlier, Ben, is we go, this is a 5B, and then we just consider that risk to be a 5B, right? Like that's what it is because that's what we've called it, right? Without going, well, it's a 5B.
At some weird fixed point, right?
It could actually be over here on this day a 1A, and over here on this day a 10Z, but we just go, that's the fucking risk, as this very static, certain type of thing that we've assessed.
Well, and that speaks to there's different types of uncertainty that I think are affecting this, right? Or variability.
He's going to say epistemic, isn't he?
I thought about it, and I chose not to. I know.
I'm the one.
Yeah.
Just say it, Ron.
No, you're not the but you know what I mean? Like on the one hand, what you just described is like, okay, there's variability in that level of risk, and that probability is really what I think what we're talking about at this moment, even though, Ben, to your point, severity is also part of this discussion as well. But if we're just talking about the likelihood of the event happening, there's variability like from one day to the next. There's also variability and inherent uncertainty, even in the confidence we have of our assessment of it. Like saying it's a 5C today and a 1B tomorrow, like we're not 100% certain that's correct.
No,
most of the time.
This is like a crazy multi-layered, not even scientific wild ass guess. I mean, we sort of like put a veil of science by giving it numbers and letters or high and low and medium.
Yeah.
And it makes, when you stand back, it makes no fucking sense. Like mathematically, it doesn't make sense. Just
because it's, I don't know where, and Ben, actually, where the fuck did the 5B thing come from? I've never in my life seen a matrix with numbers and letters.
Oh, like the
did you just make
MIL 882 standard has that.
Yeah.
I've seen those.
There's a bunch of
the system safety standard. I know their risk matrix has one like that.
Wow.
I've seen other ones like that.
It's a 5x5 or 4x4 is pretty typical, and it's letters on one side. Maybe that's severity.
So it's 3-dimensional.
No. It's 2-dimensional. So it'd be 5 across. It's like bingo. A through E. This is severity, and then on the vertical it'd be 1 through 5, and that's likelihood or probability or chance or whatever you want to call it. So you say, oh boy, well, it's probable and severe.
Okay.
And then you have this other problem of what does probable mean?
Oh my God.
Which to you or to me, and there's a lot of really good science on how shitty we are as humans at probability. And then like what is severe? So then you have to come up with these definitions that makes it seem even more scientific, where you're like, well, maybe severe is like an arm falls off. And then so we're I mean, I don't know. It sounds severe,
Yeah.
but you might think that's catastrophic, right? Which is another sort of common one.
I mean,
At the end there.
a raft puncture is a severe.
That would be so unfortunate.
But the most fun, I think, with a matrix, and this is still, I mean, in the US, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of legal requirements in many industries that tell you you don't have to use a matrix, but every guidance material has a matrix in it. And all the regulators are trained on using the matrix. So the thing that's most fun about it, I think, is that you, at some static made up point, give it a 5B. And in terms of tolerability, you go, look, I can't stand it. That's the worst risk I've ever seen. I hate it, and it's got to be better. And then you just do other magical thinking, and you're like, man, it's 3B, and that's bad. Like 3B even better.
Militime.
And I think
done.
I think what's kind of interesting is how assessment of risk kind of makes some sense in the aggregate, right? It doesn't make sense in like the individual trial. I mean, it does if you say it's heads and tails, I'll flip a coin, it's 50%, right? But it doesn't mean you can't flip 10 heads in a row, right? So in aggregate, and there's a book by Bernstein about Against the Gods, and I actually had it as a course book like 20 years ago in a risk subject, in like a master's risk subject. And interestingly, these things make sense when we're looking at the casino trying to make money over a month or a quarter with all of the bets that take place in the house, and or there's insurance companies are trying to kind of like work out in the aggregate. And I sort of tell a story like, if you line up 100 doors and put like Ben chasing mountain lion behind one of those doors, right?
Spray foam.
It's like there's a 1% chance of, you know, the door you opening, Ben, the 1% chance the door that Ben opens has that mountain lion behind it. Doesn't fucking help him if that's the door he opens, right? And I think
it's right.
A practical work example is, I find it funny where you'll have we did some work with a utility company doing digging up underground infrastructure, right? And there's always a risk that you dig up and, you know, like hit a gas main or an electrical cable or something like that. And I always find it funny that they're standing there, not funny but stupid, standing there doing like a risk assessment, going, oh, well, it's possible we could hit and you know this, and you know, it probably wouldn't be that bad, so we don't need to do anything about it. Like just fucking manage the potential hazard, right? So I think it actually, when we put a risk tool for a single trial, like a single activity, I think we can convince ourselves that something bad's not going to happen.
I think then the flip side to that, and another thing that happens really commonly, right? So you have JSAs and JHAs and other things at the point of work, but then you also have this other thing where a safety team or a risk team or whatever the hell they are is in a dimly lit, smoke-filled room, and they're doing risk assessments independent of the work in, as they see it, the aggregate. And then it doesn't represent 99 out of 100 times at the point of work.
Yeah.
So do we just shit can all of it?
Yeah, like the assessment that you and Ron were doing with Nick at the Punk Rock Safety Museum when I wasn't there.
I don't even remember that. Like
99 out of 100 times.
That's one of those. That's one of those traumatic experiences, Ron, that your therapist has suggested that you forget about.
Just
I don't know what
repress
you're
it.
talking about.
Repress it,
I break down. I cry.
I was in a Pringles can induced delirium.
Yeah, you were so.
Like I wasn't even. I felt so awful. Oh God, I'm bringing one to LA. 100%. So you've avoided the question though, which is, do we shit can the whole thing? Like what?
Well, I think I care when Boeing are building. When Boeing are building planes, I think I care that they do some reliability analysis on the doors and go, what's the probability of these doors falling off, and maybe I should have a little chain to secure the door in case it falls. Like, I think at a system safety
Like a
level,
pocket watch chain. It's just
like, yeah.
flapping along the air.
Like I don't know what you call them in the States, but like a bungee cord. Do you call those elastic?
Yeah, we call it a bungee cord.
Yeah,
Bungee
if I
cord?
see a fucking bungee cord holding a door on a plane, I'm gonna be so pissed. There's a Boeing engineer listening to this, writing furiously, bungee cord.
Take this down.
Packet of 4 different sizes.
You stretch the first one out. You need another one.
That's called redundancy or layers of protection.
Just slices of cheese, boys. Slices of cheese.
If one's good, 4 must be better.
Static. Yeah. But
So-
so that's all sort of probability calculus and fault trees and event trees and all this like fun engineering stuff.
What's the difference?
And they've done it. And then, as you said, Dave, it doesn't really matter if you're the dude sat next to the door when it pops off, right? So
Yeah.
so then does the probability matter as much as knowing that it's there? And is that when we get into like critical controls? Of just saying, look, the gas line is there. It is going to be bad if I poke a hole in it with an excavator.
Well, to me, like what we're talking about is the other side that, you know, a lot of times people talk about the inherent uncertainty and the probability. That's what we've been kind of really talking about. But like on the severity side, like that is, and I don't think people appreciate this enough. Like you can be very scientific and objective about the probability side. Once you get to the severity side, it is all value judgment. Like it's, you know, you can say
Unless
how
you've
many people-
defined it, right?
but that's still subjective. Like
okay. So
you
some
can
of
say
the
that-
standards, though, say things like, so they may split severity, right? And damn it, someone will tell me, well, one of our 3 listeners, they probably don't give a shit. But there are standards. There's a standard that shows severity in terms of reputational damage, economic, operational impact.
Yeah.
It just goes down this
I've
list,
seen
right?
this.
So maybe there's 8 things.
But that's
And-
all value judgments. They
But
can
if you but-
objectively classify each level, but to say that this level is worse than that level is them making a statement for me. Because I've
But
seen
I don't
some
think
that,
they're
like,
saying it's worse. Like economic is not worse than
no. I'm saying level 5 is worse than level 4 is worse than level
but what
3.
they do to try
And
to
one is
make it,
catastrophic and one is
like
bad.
over $1 million for me is catastrophic, right? So they may say, okay,
But-
it's over 10 million. I don't know what Boeing says. Only 4 people got sucked out the door.
But let's go to like the worst case scenario,
That's
like
not-
take it out of the economic and put it into
Okay.
like the human life. And like I've seen risk assessments that have the highest level is a death, which that makes some sense, right? And then I've seen other ones where one death is actually like a 4 out of 5. A 5 is like 10 deaths. Like, okay,
yeah.
which
yeah.
one, you know, like,
It's risk tolerability, right? So if
And
you're
that's
cool
the
with killing 10
subjectivity.
people,
that's the subjectivity,
yeah.
right? That's
so
what
who
I'm
gets
talking
to
about.
And I think
I'm gonna so like Sid Decker would say, not that I know him or I've ever
Tier 1
heard of
though.
him, but tier 1, he would say who gets to draw the line,
Yeah.
right? Something like that. Okay.
Yeah. I think
we
the
call
thing
them?
though about risk in as the way it's been like I like the way Drew Ray talks about is like a risk assessment is an input to a decision. So first of all, identify the decision that needs to be made, and then make sure that that decision hasn't been made yet. Because if the decision's been made, you're just justifying a decision, then you'll manipulate the assessment to give you the answer you want. So it's kind of like a risk assessment's got to be at the point of decisions being made, and that decision kind of hasn't been made yet. And I think they're really important criteria. Because in organizations, so much of the work that we do in risk assessment, we just do in a risk workshop, and there's no actual kind of decision. Or we've got a course of action, and then some manager or someone asks you to go, can you do a risk assessment in case someone asks me about why I made this decision?
Yeah.
And so I think in all of this, it's kind of like, are you, when you're in the casino, you're going to got $100, and I know what I stand to lose, and I know my chance of losing it. And the outcome's still uncertain, but you can at least throw some numbers around that thing. But to your point, Ron, like 1 people die, 5 people die, 300 seats on the plane. What's the average number of bookings of seats on the, like, it's just, why the fucking, why are you doing it?
If you take it to the next level too, like after the event happens and like, okay, we determined that risk was tolerable because only one person could die in like 1 in a million chance. If that one person dies, they're not going to be like, well, I guess they did a good job on the risk assessment.
Yeah.
And also
one for the team, guys. You're welcome.
There is a point at which shit happens, right? Like there is a point at which that you cannot get to a zero risk position. Like it's mathematically impossible, and it's just fucking lazy.
As low as reasonably practicable is the way that's
all incidents are not preventable
generally.
From a foresight perspective. So it is the future. Like
Ron. So we had to kill that guy. Okay.
Who knows? Like
not our fault. That guy's dead. That's just
like, we don't know.
Was up.
We don't know what
Frank.
We don't know what happens. What's going to happen when Ben, orders a drink in a Pringles can? Like no one knows that shit. Like we could sit there all day and try to do a risk.
You couldn't have guessed that would have been awful. No one. I don't think anyone could have guessed.
Like we did sit there, and in fact we got it so wrong. When we were doing our risk assessment, we actually sat there at the time and go, "This sounds like a good idea. This only has upside potential."
Yeah, exactly.
This is the cool part about the word risk, I think, is that back in the day, if I understand this correctly, you can fact check me, one of the 3 listeners can. It only really represented the upside to things. It was sort of like the opportunity for adventure. And the people who fucked it up were British insurance. Well, at the time, it was just they're gambling on ships sinking in a bar, which I believe was called Lloyd's.
Lloyd's, I think it might have been, yeah.
And invented insurance on the basis of calling these things risk. And
luckily,
ruined
that's
the word.
Only time the British have fucked up anything in the world.
It's true. Everything's been pretty super great. Aside from that.
You're happy. You're happy to go all out on the Russians, but you're too scared to call out.
Like he's doing Russian impersonations. Jesus,
what are the British going to do?
Well, that was a bit of a backhanded compliment.
Yeah, it's going great, Rod. Keep it up.
There's this whole other podcast called "Shit the British Stole." It's a great podcast. You should listen to it.
Is that real?
It's a podcast.
It's probably better than this one. If you're listening to this one,
they have a lot more than 4.
Suggested a better one. But I think that's important maybe to recognize, and to Dave's point and maybe Drew's point, which was don't do this as a fucking exercise to justify a decision, but also recognize that all we're really doing generally is trying to quantify the bad shit that could happen. And we're really only going through that exercise because we think there's good shit anyway. Like this Pringles can's probably going to be awesome. Going to LA with you two knuckleheads is probably, there's risk, right? There's an opportunity.
You mean all opportunity?
Giving Nick the bartender your phone number. So
yes.
No. He gave it to us.
Yeah, that was fantastic. No, I gave him yours.
Is that number that keeps calling?
But no, I think one of the things that is a quote, I think it was Dwight Eisenhower, who said, in planning for battle or preparing for battle, I found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. And I think that sort of applies here, is if we use it as a decision-making tool at the point of decision, it can help us think through the various aspects of the job, maybe, or whatever it is we're trying to do, the design, whatever. And, if we take it seriously as that, and understand, back to where we started with the uncertainty piece, understand there's a lot of uncertainty. So we need to bring that into the conversation. I could see some value for something like this.
I think to extend on I agree entirely. And I think to extend on that point is what we don't want to do with the risk process is feel like we've got control over the risk. Right? We've done an assessment, it's green or it's yellow or it's a 3B. We have this in control. We don't have to worry about this anymore. So I think to your point, Ron, I think it's like our risk process is a really good, way of us thinking through an issue, and still at the end of that, knowing that we don't know shit about what could happen in the future. And I think one of the things that I worry about, just now that you've mentioned that, worry about is companies going, but it's low, it's a low risk. Job done.
Yeah, it's
so
fine.
Then how do you, if everything is worth, and I think this is what companies would say, right? So if I can't prioritize based on low, medium, high, whatever it is, then I have to pay attention to everything. And if everything is important, nothing is important.
Well, don't be fucking lazy, right?
Lazy.
Like seriously, like it's just management. It's a management cop out to just go, what are the top 3 risks? I can only worry about 3 things because I'm, I just don't have the time. It's like, well, assign the responsibility to someone in your organization who does have the fucking time to pay attention to it. Like, and I don't mean to say that you should have someone standing there all day watching the sidewalk to make sure that no cracks appear. But we I think if there's a
crack
risk
watcher,
crack watcher,
what's your job? I look out for cracks. It's fine.
Spend all day. Well, this could go a range of places.
Yeah. Let's move on.
What you do with your crack is up to you. But in more ways than one. But I think
not getting.
But I think
better.
if there's a work situations in your organization with the potential for severe, and let's label severe as something that can put someone in hospital or kill someone.
Don't be lazy, sloth. Sorry.
Pay attention to it. That's troubling.
This is Dave Proven's.
Don't be lazy.
Don't be fucking lazy.
So cranky. The sloth
like a finger. It's really on point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I didn't even notice that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I reckon that'd be a good tattoo for you to get, Ben.
A little cartoon sloth.
Yeah,
that's fun.
With Dave's
doing the finger.
Don't be lazy face on there. Don't be fucking lazy.
No,
that'd be a great t-shirt.
Pay attention.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just saying in general. Good advice. Pay attention.
Oh yeah.
All right, I'm back. So
I think the question that you asked, Ben, about what do we do? Like, should we stop doing all this shit? Should we just make sure we understand its limitations, design better processes?
Well, I think the first thing that I would tell people is it's not a decision-making tool. Yeah, I don't think it can be. I mean, maybe to Drew's point, but man, that's so rare that I don't know that I've seen it in the wild very often, right? Where you're like, you literally have no idea and you're going to put this into a risk assessment process. And that's what's going to help you decide.
I've never seen. We hear language though. We hear risk-based decisions, risk-adjusted decisions, risk-informed decisions. Like we use it conflated. We use it as we've got these labels for a risk-based decision-making process.
Yeah,
decision-informed risks.
Risk-informed.
That's actually, I gotta think on that, Ron. But I think you might be.
Don't think too hard.
Trademark that.
Trademark it early. Don't think about it for too long.
Hold on, let me fill out the application. I've got the Australian one. Dave's got the US one. That's how
decision informed risk. The acronym even works. Risk. All right.
But look, man, I don't. I think risk informed and risk based are two completely different things. And I think risk based decision making is by and large bullshit. I don't, I don't think I don't want to say never, but it would be really, really rare, I think, to make a decision based wholly on risk. I think risk may shape it, and you go, I don't know, man. I'm in Mexico getting towed behind a boat in this parachute thing, and everything's frayed. I don't know. It looks awesome, right? And that's where I think risk that sort of dual nature of it is so important. Is that there is cool shit that can happen, but at some point it's informed by the fucking rope breaking. I don't know, man. I give up. Go be a barista.
Well, I think the human element is really important, right? Because at the end of the day, is the person making a decision or the people making a decision. And
Yep.
I agree with you, Ben. I don't think I've ever seen a group of people go sitting around a risk workshop go, well, holy shit. You know,
Yeah. When's the last time you were just shocked?
Well, cancel that.
I wasn't gonna do anything, but geez, did you see what the risk assessment came out like? We have to do something now. Like,
just stunned at
just
the outcome of it.
That the risk assessment process shattered their perception of the world. Right.
Whoa.
That's so interesting.
But you said something super important too, which is that the person who is really taking on the pointy end of that risk. Speaking of Nick,
well, I think it was more Ron taking on the pointy end.
Well, the person who stands to benefit? I don't know, be the recipient of harm or benefit has to be the one that makes the decision. And they're not whipping out a fucking matrix in the moment going, I don't know, man, should I like dig the hole and do this thing or not? I mean, Ron oddly at that bar had a risk matrix, which I hadn't seen before. It's very strange.
And I guess harm and benefit are in the eye of the beholder, right?
This is the truth, my friends. But like, I agree conceptually that yes, the whatever that person is should be there, but I mean, at some level, that's not always even feasible, right? Like, so, like, think of like aircraft, for example. Like, there's aircraft that will fly over my house, and like nobody called me and said, "Hey, we're making this door on this 737."
Well, you just didn't answer.
We're thinking about bungee cords.
It all looks pretty good. The assessment all looks pretty good. But I think the point, the ultimate thing that we're trying to do with this process is, do we need to do something more? Do we need to do something differently going forward in the future, right? And so,
would that be safety differently?
Whoa.
We need to do something
different. I didn't use those words. I get enough letters from people. I don't need any more. By the way, I can give you Ben's address if you listen.
Safety differently, learning team. Should we hop in a?
Oh boy.
All right, but the idea. So I think do we need to do something else? Do we need to do something differently? So using that example is like we're gonna dig a hole. We've got conducting equipment. It's a metal excavator. We got this, and we got people. It's like, okay, this could be fine, but it's probably a bad idea to proceed. And so I think there's a for all of the fancy matrices and the 5Bs and the 10As or whatever it is. At the end of the day, the question is are we doing enough? Do we need to do something differently in the future in relation to this issue? And you could just fucking ask people, right? Put 10 people in the room and say, do you feel like what we're doing for this risk in this context is okay? And, if one person says no, then you've probably got some things to think about and ask them why they said no. And like, do the numbers even matter? Right. How much do the numbers even matter?
But that's to them probably very little.
But that's, someone somewhere at most places, right, would have said, whatever the cruise joint with the Costa Concordia, right? Someone would have said we're not doing enough, and 8 other people said, yeah, we are,
because we don't have a rule to not go out and get drunk.
Well, I don't fucking know, right? Or at Boeing, right? In hindsight, people say all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that speaks more to the need for diversity in who you talk to than the fact that people have different opinions. Because, look, your first day on the job, right, is fucking terrifying for most jobs, right? Most technical stuff, high consequence stuff. You walk into the
particularly
factory
with
and
people like you driving forklifts around.
yeah, Jesus. Yeah, there's ads or movies made about guys like me driving around. There's molten metal. There's all sorts of stuff in
Triple
whatever the
expanding
job is. It's
foam.
terrifying. Triple expanding foam. And then a year into it, you're
Shrapnel.
used to it all day, every day. So you become sort of desensitized to it. And maybe the probability is skewed by that. So I think asking people with a lot of experience or very little experience, or even people who don't work in that role, who can look at it and go, how are they not dead already? Right? Like
But I think
what's supposed to be happening here? I don't know.
Well, so I think what you're getting at. So like number one, like we have there's a you're right that like we're always going to have these different perspectives, and that's going to be a fundamental challenge, because I mean, I don't know, in my experience I've been in jobs where like there's always that one guy, who's just
Yeah,
like,
me
"Oh,"
too.
is yeah, this is doesn't we're gonna blow up the plant. Like the majority of the time he was wrong, but not all the time.
yeah.
And that's makes it
That time that you
extremely
blew up
hard.
the plant was
Yeah,
yeah.
like
I think-
fuck. Should have
Yeah.
listened.
And this is no, so it's a really good point. So I wrote a paper once.
Jesus.
Yeah,
we go.
drink.
I knew it.
Well,
Ron and I are too fucking lazy to do that.
This
I guess.
afternoon-
I mean,
you
on that
boys.
He's got a
sloth thing
dissertation.
shirt, on the back, it's got to say, "I wrote a paper once."
yeah. I don't yeah, I don't know your context, but my paper says it's wrong. um, but this quote, like, and the quote that I got queued up, because Ron, you probably haven't done the homework to have a quote queued up for us.
Fuck.
But the quote is something like, safety is not a standard to be achieved; it's a point of consensus amongst stakeholders involved. And the idea with risk assessment is, we can think of it as a standard to be achieved, which is we need to get this risk to be green, or we need to get this risk to be low, or we need to get this risk to be a 5F. And the discussion that we're just having there is, well, no, it maybe it's not as much a standard as it is getting that diverse group of people together who each have a lens on the risk. Like Ben said, the experienced person, the technical person, the safety person, the management person, the new person, and what do we all think about this? And when we all get to the point where we can't think of any other ways to practically make it safer, then we might have done enough. And I think, to your point, Ron, about there's a story that's commonly told about the Challenger launch decision and the O-rings, and the NASA engineer who tried to raise the issue and wasn't listened to. And my understanding of that, and I don't know if this is the public understanding of that, is the engineer that people are talking about complained about every fucking single thing, like literally thousands and thousands of things, to the point that maybe management had tuned out a little bit to the points. Now, maybe in hindsight was right about one thing, but I think that's the challenge of this inside organizations, that we need to speak
the law of large numbers.
Well, we need to speak to lots of different people, to try to get a sense of what's happening and what might happen in the future. And we've also got to make choices about who we listen to and when. So it is pretty hard.
Well, and I think what you're describing, so that consensus piece of it's important, but that's obviously going to speak to the need to create space where people can share their perspectives and their build that consensus, if you will. So that, and how much of the risk assessment process includes that. Like what pops in my head is something that in kind of risk tolerance research in psychology is known as the white male effect. And it's called that because when they look at perceptions of risk across different demographic groups, white males are on average outliers in that they often perceive risks as much lower than other demographic groups. Again, on average, there's obviously variability here, but
This explains a lot of our behavior, I guess.
yeah, no shit.
Definitely your behavior, Ben.
But like, there's all kinds of interesting explanations that could come into play. But the fact of the matter is, it just shows that like, hey, we need. How are we going to bring in these other voices with these other perspectives on risk? Just saying, bringing them in the room, and then that. If we're talking about demographics, that leads to tokenism, but it's the same thing. I brought a worker into the risk assessment, therefore we have their voice.
All good.
Yeah, it's not that simple, right?
And I brought the one worker in that I knew would make the contribution that I wanted the person to make.
Exactly.
We just had to justify the decision we already made, and we're going back in time.
Yeah, here's what we're gonna.
So these things are fraught with pitfalls, as it were. There's bias in it. There's the fact that often we just suck at guessing. There's, as Ron said, that sort of the white male effect, or just differences throughout experience and tenure, and then it's not a dynamic process most of the time. It's static, and we've just said, okay, here it is at this time, and we've solved it with some static thing and called it good. So maybe I guess I use the term risk fluency, right? I want people.
Oh, be careful. Speaking of risk fluent is a business in the UK, man. Be careful. That letter's on its way.
No, it isn't, is it?
Is it really?
That letter's on that's James's business, man. That letter's on its way.
Fucking fuck.
Oh shit. Okay.
We should have done a risk assessment before this fucking podcast.
I don't know. I don't know what to do. How about just fluent in risk, the language of risk, or the thinking about risk? Because it's one thing to like type a sentence into Google Translate and get essentially what the matrix or the JSA would give you. It's another to be able to make that complete sentence or complete thought about it. And I think that's the challenge for safety folks, is not better charts on a JSA. It's making sure we can have a conversation about it. To Ron's point, right? Just because you put somebody in the room doesn't mean they've got that space to speak or even know how to represent that.
And I think that's a great point. And your comment before about, as much as we all love sitting in dark, smoke-filled rooms, conspiring against people, but I think your point is risk assessment is a very social process, right? It has to be a social process. Every decision that gets made in the risk assessment process about, what something means, what's the chance of something happening, what box to put something in, that's a human decision, right? And so, I think it's really important that, to your point earlier, Ron, is that we have a process that we think helps us talk through the issues in our business more deeply and more effectively, knowing that every single outcome from every risk assessment is inherently uncertain and doesn't mean for any moment that we can take our eye off things because of the outcomes of the assessment, right? So,
because one of the things that as you were saying that popped in my head and has been kind of bouncing through my head this entire conversation is, we all know, and a lot, the three listeners who are listening are going to know that, risk involves uncertainty. Yeah, they're nodding their heads like that. But like, how often does a risk assessment include surprise, right? Like that's just not a thing.
I mean, that's a really fun risk assessment, though, right?
Yeah, right? Like,
whoa. So cool.
But like, and to me, like,
it's like a scratch off,
like just flashing Pennywise the clown.
Lotto tickets. This is perfect. But like how do you do that? Like, I think the way to create the potential for a surprise in your risk assessment outside of a Jack in the Box is through that social process, because otherwise, if you don't have an ability for people to come in and tell you your baby's ugly in your risk assessment, then your risk assessment, the social process, will actually move towards conformity. right? The gravity will move it towards like, hey, here's the dominant way we talk about this risk in this organization.
Yeah.
So you're not actually learning anything new. You're just reifying your old ways of thinking. But if you create that, bring in those diverse perspectives and create space for them to talk, then you get the opportunity for people to come along and say, actually, no good.
Don't give Ben too much of a segue into the 2-part culture episode that he wants to do.
Yes.
I mean,
is it going to be like the behavior one that we just
never do?
we got to keep some of these into the future, because what happens is someone will click on the episode and go, oh fuck, it's not that one, but we'll at least get a view. So
we'll get a listen.
Be good for the stats.
Well, and the problem
how's that working for us?
There's not enough reward for me if somebody gave me
your cocaine water.
Gave me the cocaine water, I'd probably be amped.
Hey-o.
There it is. There it is.
So, okay. So for the 3 listeners, and they already know, but when their friends ask them, risk assessment, do it, don't do it. It's like the final word.
I think do it, but do it right.
Right.
But don't be fucking lazy.
Don't suck at it.
Don't fuck it up.
Do it as
long
as you do it my fucking way. The Ron Gant risk method.
Yeah, the scratch card.
Yeah. This is the new Taylorism. It's Ronism.
Ronism.
One best method.
But I think other than just I think
you think I'm right. Say it.
So I think the interesting thing is that you will be doing risk assessment whether you think you're doing risk assessment or not, right? Because we have, for the history of humankind, even your pets around the house are doing risk assessments about choices that they may want to make. And
Penny's laying right over here.
If I was one of your dogs, Ron, living in your house, I'd be doing a lot of risk assessment. I do a risk assessment before I fucking did anything. But I think the point is
they're risk fluent. I've trained these fuckers.
You're doing it, and we need to have processes that that supplement the way that humans think about the way that we think about risk, right? Not try to say, well, don't be human. We don't want any intuition here. We don't want any guesswork. We don't want any gut feelings. We don't want anything like that. Use the fucking form.
Yeah.
When in fact, intuition and gut feelings and all these things are
still part of it, right?
Really critical.
Yeah, and I think I'm yet. So I think the point would be do it, but maybe sort of have a good long hard look at yourself and your process in the mirror before you take it out. Take it out to a bar.
Wow. It's all coming together there.
They don't let you on the plane,
and then it wasn't.
You got to know, I've had 2 bar experiences with you guys. One of them was involving Ron and Big Dick Nick, and one of them was involving Ben getting assaulted by a mountain lion.
I just want to clarify that Nick was far more interested in Ben than me. Let's just out of curiosity, who ended up getting his number?
Well, he handed it to me. I think what he meant to do was
So we know for future risk assessments that Ben is our single point. Ben's our single point of failure.
Send me in first to clear the place out.
Ben does our bomb sweeping, our mine sweeping.
I've earned it. All right. So do it in Ron's words, but do it right.
Don't suck at it.
Yeah. And and if you've got a JSA and you're going to get fired for not doing the JSA, probably do the JSA, and then
its own risk assessment,
right? And then have a good discussion. And I think really, as new people come into the crew or the team, a lot of this is about giving people the language to talk about risk. And the permission to talk about risk, and understanding that certainty is very rarely good for us in high consequence work. So,
well, and one other thing I just want to add that you just brought up really quickly about doing the JSA because you have to. It's also probably worth in the conversation to really understand what you have to do, because these things almost always have multiple goals, and
Yeah.
And so you want to understand what those other goals are, what your constraints are, how big's the sandbox you have to play in. But then also, secondly, there's a lot of risk assessments where people do things because they think they have to, but then you go and you look and actually you don't. You could do what, you have a lot more leeway than you think you do. So I would say one of the early steps in the process is really understand what your constraints are. And then that helps you
And
know.
then do whatever you want, I think was Ron's advice.
And
to
I think,
wrap up.
Fire the safety people.
Look at Ron going off at the end. It's like anyone would think that risk assessment was like joint cognitive activity across boundaries.
Yeah.
It's
and what
chapter
isn't
5,
really?
bitches.
It's not just episode 14.
It's Ron's postdoc.
This is
platform.
part of the 7-part series on joint cognitive activity.
Yeah, exactly. My treatise.
So it is going to be when this lands. I think if my maths is nearly correct, it'll be only a fortnight or so, or 2 weeks until 2 weeks and maybe 2 days until we are in San Pedro.
That's gonna be awesome.
Also known as Los Angeles, but on like a loading dock, which, if I believe action movies, is where all drug deals and explosions happen.
No,
and probably someone's going to chase us with a Connex.
So I might be better. So it'll probably take the same amount of time if I come by boat directly rather than go through the LAX customs hall.
Yeah,
that's actually that's a good point.
But it'll be more fun.
Yeah.
I can bring a lot more cool stuff by boat than I can by plane.
Yes, you can.
So, anyways, you all should come and join us at the docks for the drug deals and explosions.
Should we call it the first annual punk rock safety field trip?
I think so.
Field trip, yeah. Everybody on the bus.
Field trip sounds fun, yeah.
Field trip at the docks.
Get on the damn bus.
Get on the bus.
We'll make a T-shirt, a commemorative shirt.
Oh, if you show up, you get a shirt.
If you show up, you get a shirt and a tattoo. The same thing applies. The tattoo thing applies. I'm going to keep threatening people, and someone will take us up on the offer. I tried to get Sam to do it, and he hasn't called back after we offered the last episode.
I think his phone's broken because it just it rings once and goes right to voicemail every time. I don't.
Weird. Who wouldn't take us up on that? All right.
Awesome, guys.